Hey, yo, what's up? Welcome to Yahazek Reacts, the channel where instead of making content of our own, I kind of just watch someone else's video and pretend I add value to it by commenting. Okay, today I'm watching Rasputin's video. Let me. They're games I wish I never replayed. Now, the reason I thought that was interesting is because I literally never had the thought, fuck, I wish I hadn't replayed that game before. What does he mean? Does he mean like it ruins the experience? Maybe you find out too much about a game by replaying it. Maybe it ruins the charm. I don't know, but either way, I think that would be interesting to find out. Let's just not waste
In March of
time. Let's just fucking start.
BioShock Infinite released to near universal acclaim. Everything from its complex and thought-provoking story, to its breathtaking setting, to its engaging gameplay loop, to its intriguing cast of characters, most notably the heart and soul of...
Oh, so you're gonna talk about old games and how they didn't age as well as he thought, and he wished he hadn't replayed them because now he knows that they weren't as good as he remembered them to be. That'll be my guess.
The game, Elizabeth, was praised as some of the best work that had ever come out of the gaming industry. It did so many things incredibly well, and for many people, after finishing it, they walked away with the sense that they had just played a masterpiece. And I was one of those people. I had never been so moved by a game before. I didn't think it was perfect, because nothing is, but it felt like a once-in-a-generation title that pushed the boundaries of what games could be, and told a story that seemed like something greater. Once I beat it, I immediately beat it again, and then a third time. Within 2 weeks, I had all of the achievements, and I found myself thinking about it non-stop. I wrote notes trying to
that's kind of me with Hollow Knight.
Timelines of the story.
Hollow Knight seemed a little too short. It only took me like 150 hours to do everything I could think of. Like, I didn't actually beat every Pantheon boss because I just didn't see the point. God Hall, I mean. I did beat Absolute Radiance in the second difficulty, but never Radiant. That's not the point. What is the point? Oh yeah, that I had the same experience, and actually that didn't make me like Hollow Knight any less. In fact, if anything, I am more hyped for the sequel.
And came up with theories about every possible explanation there could be for the ending. To be honest, it is one of maybe 3 titles that got me to want to start making videos in the first place. I adored it. And since playing it a decade ago, I have always considered it to be one of the best games ever made. Then last month, I played it again, and
I see.
I wouldn't say it is a terrible game by any means, but throughout this replay, I found myself constantly thinking, why did I ever like this so much? And look, I'm sure we've all gone...
Because there was nothing better at the time. That was the best. I'm sure it could have been great for its time. And also, yeah, I think that's it, honestly. Just, I think the time frame plays a much bigger part than...
back to a game we once loved, only to find that it has aged poorly in one way or another. I still get sad
also,
every time I try to play.
Love that I 100% predicted exactly what the video is going to be about. Granted, I did have a few hints after seeing like the first 10 seconds of the video, but still, I'll give myself a pat on the head.
The GoldenEye for the N64, only to find that it is near unplayable. But revisiting Infinite felt different than that. In fact, while the game certainly is a product of its time, its mechanics, graphics, and approach to storytelling aren't all that dated. It still looks good and plays mostly fine. So this isn't just a case of an older game being kind of old. It's a bit more than that.
Really? Okay.
To be honest, the parts of Infinite
now.
that bother me most now are things people have been critical of since its release. Its story is a mess, largely due to it using quantum mechanics and the many worlds theory in a way that really isn't very logical. Most of its major themes fall flat, as even though the game tackles many complex ideas, it fumbles at every chance it gets.
It could be not even the game itself was back in the day was as good as it gets, but maybe this was as good as you'd seen a depiction of what the game has to say. And so for you, that was basically, for you, I'm saying for you as if I get a little parasocial here, sorry, for this guy here, maybe that was just the best he'd seen at the time. Also, age plays a part. I don't know how old he is, so I can't tell. Like, if he was a bit of a like a kid my age, and then like I really don't know his age. So this point could make no sense.
Say something meaningful, and the characters don't have all that much depth to them, making nearly every moment that should feel impactful.
But it could be the deepest games you've ever seen at that point, and also your mental age at the time plays a big part, I think.
Not hit nearly as hard as they're meant to. When I first played Infinite, I never would have imagined I'd say any of these things about it, as it had such a profound effect on me. I had this sense that the game was important. I don't know that I could have articulated why, but I just knew it. And looking back now, I think a lot of that was rooted in an aspect that Infinite actually does excel at: spectacle. The presentation of Infinite is impressive even by today's standards. Every environment is visually striking, and Colombia as a whole is one of the coolest looking video game cities out there. The art style is colorful.
Part of the reason I liked Crash of the Titans, there were some levels that just had me fucking in awe. They technically look pretty mid with the graphics and shit, but like the giant tree with like hopping around on mushrooms. Let me show you real quick. This fucking tree, that was such a sick level. That was the concept art for it. Yeah, here's the concept art, and you had like this path that you walk along. It's massive. It felt fucking crazy. That shit was wild. Like you climb up and it's all one big tree. Like holy shit. And it would have like little mushroom parts on it, and you jump across them like that. Yeah, like lily pads with acid. Imagery plays a huge part in how good a game seems. I 100% agree with that, especially when you're kind of new to gaming.
Colorful and in some ways timeless, as they went for a more Disney-type look than a hyper-realistic one. Along with that, the performances are stellar, especially those of the Lutece twins and, of course, Elizabeth. Robert and Rosalind's dialogue is flawlessly delivered by Oliver Vaquer and Jennifer Hale. Nearly every one of their lines is filled with sharp, witty wordplay that contains loads of layers, some of which can't be understood fully until subsequent playthroughs. And Courtney Draper's portrayal of Elizabeth exudes so much innocence and wonder and longing that it is almost too easy to align with her goals instead of Booker's. And the story itself has a grand concept, one based around how choices can shape reality, and it uses the frame of the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics to show the consequences of characters' choices. There are many twists throughout that literally shift the game's reality, and when first playing it, every time I thought I understood what
I had no
was
idea
going
this game
on,
actually
it
had
hit
any of
me
this,
with
because I've never played Bioshock. I've only like heard people talk about it on YouTube.
Something new and exciting that always kept me on my toes. It bombards players with all of these aspects, barely giving them any time to reflect, and because of that, it is so easy to get swept away, to be enthralled by what you're seeing and hearing and experiencing, to have this sense that the game is important because it is telling you that it is through its spectacle.
Yeah.
But when you look past the glamour, when you try to dig into what it's all about, things get a bit muddy. Not everything adds up by the end, and a lot of choices the characters make feel contrived or out of left field. With pretty much any story, you need to suspend your disbelief to a degree, but Bioshock Infinite pushes that suspension past a reasonable level. Back in 2013, I had no problem with that, and to be honest, I didn't really question anything until I'd reached the credits, because the game moved at such a rapid pace that all I could think about was what might come next.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
This time, I found myself questioning everything. Like, why did Booker and Elizabeth go into a new reality in order to find the weapons they were tasked by Daisy Fitzroy to get, without considering that the Daisy Fitzroy in that reality might not have made the same deal with Booker or even know he exists? And for that matter, why did the game paint Daisy as being just as bad as Comstock for leading a justified rebellion against him and Fink? And why did she have a last-second heel turn where she started threatening the life of a kid? And I know the DLC answers it, but honestly, it only makes it worse. And why do only some people lose their mind from being dead in one reality but alive in another? If there are theoretically infinite realities,
I see. So this game is
everyone
full
would
of
be dead in at
stupid
least
plot
one.
holes.
So shouldn't every single person be having the same conflict? Or is this a result of how going through tears works? Is it less about traveling from one reality to the next and more about collapsing two onto each other, essentially merging them? But if that's the case, why aren't things merged?
But I think things not making as much sense as they should actually probably fueled the interest of, oh, I don't fully understand this shit. When you're first playing the game, you're like, holy shit, that is so cool. I don't get why they did that. I'm sure there's a reason, but you don't understand it yet because you're not deep enough into the game or whatever. You haven't done enough lore studies, we'll say. But no, actually, there's just no good reason. It is what it is. I think a lot of plot holes are easy to forgive so long as you don't realize they're plot holes and you expect them to be corrected later, and then you just forget they existed in the first place. At least that could be applied to me, because I see myself doing that with like a mediocre manga I read sometimes.
Except in this one small specific way. Shouldn't there be doubles of everything or merged versions of people, either physically or mentally? And what actually was the deal with Lady Comstock's ghost? Because she doesn't really follow any of the
Lady
rules the game
Comstock
establishes, and it feels
Well, okay, let me turn on the caption. Comstock. Okay.
deal with Lady Comstock's ghost, because she doesn't really follow any of the rules the game establishes, and it feels like they needed a unique seeming boss more than anything else, regardless of how it breaks the science of the game. And don't even
Right.
get me started on the ending, which asks players to buy into a wildly arbitrary explanation for how the many worlds theory works. None of it makes... This isn't what I'm here to do. I don't want to pick at every aspect of BioShock Infinite I now find to be questionable and set forward arguments about why I don't think they work. Honestly,
I've been recording for too long, bro. How much have I recorded today? Like 10 hours? I don't know, like 5. I can see why
I
my
don't think it
computer's
matters
dying.
much whether Infinite is good or not, and even if I did, I don't think there is anything
Oh,
I
my
can
phone,
say
sorry.
that will settle the matter. Convincing you that BioShock Infinite is bad actually is not something I'm interested in doing. In
That's
fact,
fair.
if you like Infinite, if it still means something to you and you feel moved by the events of the game, I truly hope you continue to, because
Well, I think the story having plot holes doesn't ruin the message or any of the character development that goes on, right? It might ruin it for you personally if you pay attention to it. But if you don't see it, then it's not there, really. Because that's how... Yeah, that's just how it is.
I wish I did. I don't like feeling as if I've lost one of my favorite games. And the worst part is that this isn't an isolated incident. For me, replaying old favorites now comes at the risk of them no longer being old favorites. A similar thing has happened to me with 2 other games in the past couple of years, one of which you're all going to be really mad at me about. Those being Assassin's Creed 2 and The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Both have long been on my
Okay.
short list of favorite games of all time.
Haven't played any of these again. I definitely had Assassin's Creed 2 on my Xbox 360, I think. Unless it was a different Assassin's Creed game, I don't know. They all look the same to me. But I only played like in the part where it was like the game was like pixelated and shit because you were just going into the simulation, and
During my latest replay of
yeah, that's
each,
it.
I found very little
And then I stopped.
enjoyment in them. I don't have any disdain for them in the way I sort of do now for BioShock Infinite, but my love of both has been tarnished. And of course, the question I can't help but ask myself is, what's wrong with me?
You were just a game virgin, so all this shit seemed crazy to you. It is not actually crazy, but it was as crazy as it gets at the
Why
time,
is there such a disconnect
both for you and for gaming as itself.
between how I felt about these games before replaying them and how I feel now after? And
That's
while
just
the
my theory,
answer
though.
for each game is different, it mostly comes down to a combination of 3 things.
Oh,
how
3
I've
things, okay, I had
changed,
to.
how the gaming landscape has changed, and how one of the most unreliable things in the known world is human memory. Well, all of these elements apply to my changed feelings
Alright.
towards these 3 games.
Oh, I
One
actually
aspect
saw
to
ads for this game on Steam.
memory. Well,
I
all of
I was
these
considering
elements
playing
apply
it,
to
but
my
I haven't
changed
yet
feelings
because it
towards
seems like it'll require me to use my brain too much, and I am not a
these
fan of
3
that.
games, one aspect typically takes the driver's seat more than the others. For instance, my feelings towards BioShock Infinite are influenced most by the ways I've changed. Like, when I first played it, I didn't do this as a job. I barely even looked at games critically. I just played them because they were fun.
Yep.
To be clear, this isn't me trying to say that I was wrong to like it then and only did because I wasn't as smart as I am now. It's more that since starting to regularly analyze and critique games, I look at them through a different lens than I used to. One that often leads to me being more
Yeah, it's in the same way I can't enjoy a fucking video without paying attention to the editing too much because I started making slightly edited videos myself. On my main channel, always be plugging. Go check it out. By the way, I make really good videos. Let's go.
critical about stuff I play, because I want to examine things from many different perspectives and acknowledge both successes and flaws to determine what works well and what could work better. I do my best to not let it control me too much, but as I spend more time thinking about the negatives than I used to, it makes it easier to walk away from a game feeling negative about it. In turn, viewing things through a more analytical lens has led to it being harder for me to get swept up in something like the hype or spectacle of BioShock Infinite.
My brother, my older brother, also talked about that regarding music. He makes music himself, and now he can't just like casually turn up the radio and listen to the shit on it, cause he'll like just be like, oh, what is this? I don't like this song. This one is like weirdly built. Oh, listen to how like that part is made. Oh, ooh, that's interesting. I wonder what fucking they used to sample that sound effect. And it's like, yeah, it just happens. It is what it is. The moment you get into a field, you cannot enjoy some parts of the enjoyment go, but you get new parts. So it's I'd say on the whole, you're actually benefiting from getting into something, right? Like, just because I now pay attention to how a video is edited doesn't mean I won't like it as much. It just means I'm
because
diverting my attention to it, and I can appreciate it in a different way.
I am actively trying to look past those things. Where the grandiose nature of Infinite once helped to distract me from the parts of the game that might raise eyebrows, this time through, its use of spectacle only highlighted them. Along with that, I am also a decade older now, and throughout those 10 years, I have become more cynical. I'd like to think I'm not a curmudgeon, but I did just say curmudgeon, which I think kind of makes me...
Sorry, what's curmudgeon?
I'd like to think I'm not...
Kurmudgeon. Kurmudgeon. Curmudgeon, a bad-tempered person, especially an old one. Okay.
a curmudgeon, but I did just say curmudgeon, which I think kind of makes me a curmudgeon. But I don't have the same bright-eyed enthusiasm I once did. I'm more picky now about how I spend my time because I don't have as much of it as I used to. Along with this, I hadn't played nearly as many titles at that point in my life, and Infinite did a fair amount of stuff, especially in regards to Elizabeth's AI and animations, that were cutting edge at the time and unlike anything I had seen before. But while I can still recognize that this was groundbreaking for 2013, when replaying it, it didn't wow me in the same way it once did. Back then, Elizabeth being so impressive made it easier for me to look past the parts of the game that weren't, as it is harder to see the flaws of something when you are so focused on the positive. However, as I wasn't as impressed by her on this playthrough, I didn't spend nearly as much time focusing on the good. And the main reason Elizabeth didn't have the same impact on me was because I've seen companion characters be done better since. In fact, I think it was done better later.
You're not gonna talk about companion characters being done better and show fucking child or fucking boy from God of War. That guy was annoying as shit. I hated him so much.
Seeing companion characters be done better since. In fact, I think it was done better later in the same year Infinite came out with Ellie in The Last of Us. And a part of me wonders now whether or not Infinite would have been looked at differently had it come out after The Last of Us instead.
And I'm not just saying that like in the way where the game made me hate him. No, I didn't hate him for the character. I hated him for the fucking constant speak. It's just the little things that were supposed to be charming that I just made me mad.
Players and reviewers would have been measuring Elizabeth's effectiveness as a character up against Ellie's instead of the other way around. Yeah. And I think that's a comparison that doesn't do Elizabeth any favors. This is obviously all speculation and means very little, but I think it would have reviewed a bit worse had that been the case. The scores wouldn't have been dramatically lower, but I do think they would have been lower. And this starts to touch more and more on how games have changed, because the gaming landscape is continually iterating upon itself, which on one hand has led to incredible titles that elevate what came before, and on the other has caused some developers to retread the same ground a bit too often, causing many titles to feel stale and played out. By and large, that's where
to be fair, games like Horizon, for example,
often causing,
while all of the way it works is very similar to, like, yeah, it's just another open world game. They're all the same. But I played this game as a person with very little open world games experience, and to me it was a fucking banger, because all these mechanics in Avoid, they're really good. It's just how they're overused that makes them repetitive. But but I played the game in Avoid, and so therefore it was fun. Now granted, the game has a bunch of other problems. For example, absolutely pointless side quests and being able to go kill ninjas or fucking robbers for literally no reason. There was no reason to do it. Why would I bother? Just a lot of the shit. It had all the standard problems of these games, and I recognize the problems, but the repetitiveness of it, which is the biggest issue, I would assume, it just wasn't a problem for me, because this was a new formula.
Many titles to feel stale and played out.
To me.
By and large, that's where a lot of my feelings towards Assassin's Creed 2 stemmed from while replaying it. I have long held it up as one of the best open world games out there and the peak of the Assassin's Creed series. When it first came out, running around...
That said, I really fucking hope Horizon Forbidden West doesn't have the same issues. Like, I really hope they make... please, I just want Horizon Zero Dawn, but not cringe. Like, just remove all the stupid shit and maybe spend like 10 more years developing it if you really need to. Just please don't make it as repetitive later on. Okay, let's switch.
On the streets of Florence and Venice was one of the coolest things I had ever done in a game, and it literally got me to look at the world differently. I couldn't even glance at real world buildings without searching for the best way to climb them. Okay,
straight up, not Assassin's Creed related. I got obsessed with a game, Cycle Frontier, recently. I played so much of that game, I saw birds take off in the distance, and I'm like, holy shit, there's a player there. Get fucking ready. And in my head, I prepared with like I pulled out my fucking gun, bro. I am an adult technically. How am I still thinking about that shit? That's what? And also, I saw a plane. I saw the trail of a plane. Like, you know how the planes leave these like white trails in the sky. I was like, oh my god, look at that. That's like some fresh drop pod just landed. I gotta. That's the first thing that crossed my mind when I saw it.
At the time, it was one of the most freeing and unique video game experiences.
It's just I know that was kind of a tangent, not really relevant to the video, but I just thought it was a funny story.
But since then, its core formula has been copied countless times. Most modern open-world games take at least some cues from the first two Assassin's Creed titles, and many still emulate the structure that AC2 popularized back in 2009.
I fucking hate this system of climbing, by the way. It's so goddamn annoying, and I didn't care about it that much until I played God of War and Horizon. Actually, they both had it.
It isn't.
When I played it in older games, it didn't bother me because, again, I was just more or less new to gaming, you know? It all felt fresh and cool. But after seeing it for the 100th time, I'm like, bro, come on. What's the word? No. Neutralize? No. What's the word for inventing new shit? That's what I'm thinking of.
Hard to trace a line from Assassin's Creed 2 all the way to Horizon Forbidden West. And look, it is a style of open world game that has been proven to sell, which is obviously why so many studios have developed titles.
What is that climbing system?
But it is a formula that has gotten stale for many people, myself very much included. Going back to play Assassin's Creed 2 in a world where so many titles are just Assassin's Creed 2 but a slightly different flavor has made playing it just as boring to me as playing any of those.
I think it's not even that so many titles are the game but a different flavor. I think it's more that lots of games use the core mechanics of Assassin's Creed and then turn it into a completely different game altogether while still keeping those and expanding on it a ton. And then you come back to this game, which is like a stripped down version of all those other games you've played, but without any changes. So you're just playing a raw version of what all the other games had to offer. And like, of course it's going to be boring.
Games. For so long, though, I imagined it as if it were somehow different, as if it were somehow better than those games. With the Assassin's Creed series specifically, as each new title came out and appealed to me less and less, I kept thinking back to my time with AC2 and wishing the series would have a return to form. But it already was in form. For better or worse, the gaming industry has been shaped by AC2. And maybe this isn't fair, but as someone who doesn't love the direction open world games have taken, during my replay, I found myself resenting it. Assassin's Creed 2 is the face that launched 1,000 ships. For so long, I thought of it as an exception to the Ubisoft rule, but in reality, it is the rule. It does all the things people make fun of Ubisoft games for doing, and it does a lot of them far more often than titles that get infinitely more crap for doing them.
But it was fine because it invented it.
While a large part of this is a
yeah, it just invented them, so you can't blame it.
Result of how the gaming landscape has changed. Obviously, the unreliability of memory, in this case, my memory, did some of the heavy lifting as well. I remembered how the game made me feel, but not the specifics of actually playing it. And over time, I subconsciously filled in new details.
Keep some good memories.
It stopped being the version of the game it actually was and started being the one I wanted it to be. In this process,
that, I guess, leads back to the title of the video, games I wish I hadn't replayed. Very fair. I completely get what he means now. That said, I still don't have any games like that because, weirdly enough, a lot of the games I had played when I was a kid, I came back to and I was surprised that they had a lot more depth than I thought they had. Probably because I was way too small to actually remember them properly or play them well.
This of misremembering a game can be seen even more blatantly by looking at my experience with Majora's Mask. For the majority of my adult life, Majora's Mask was high up on my list of all-time favorite games. I loved its atmosphere, tone, and general weirdness. I found its use of masks that expand Link's abilities to be nothing short of brilliant. I felt its slate of dungeons were the most creative and consistent in the series, and above all else, I adored the dark and deep story it told that explored heavy themes and presented characters who weren't the typical heroes we're used to seeing in Zelda games. When I replayed it though, almost none of these things felt as grand as I expected them to. It's not that these elements weren't there at all, but they didn't live up to how I remembered them. The characters didn't feel all that fleshed out. The mask mechanics seemed like they weren't utilized.
Well, again, it's because I think you just see a lot more of these things later because someone makes a really good system. And I was like, okay, well, shit, I'll make a different version of that system. Maybe make it better, maybe make it worse. I don't know. And after you see all these systems 100 times over, going back and seeing just the default version of it, not going to be that impressive because it's like, yeah, it's been done. It's been done. I've seen it before. I've seen it better.
To their full potential. The dungeons ranged wildly in quality, and the story didn't grip me in any
Don't want to pause too many times because I kind of
thought the problem might just be that the N64 had aged to a point where it was hard to go back and play games from it. But within the same year, I replayed Ocarina of Time and had an absolute blast. So it wasn't that. What I recognize now
that's
is that
actually very interesting.
when I started to consider Majora's Mask to be one of my favorite games, it had been years since I had actually last played it. And I'm sure some people will chalk this up to pure nostalgia, which I imagine played a bit of a role, but growing up, I didn't care about Majora's Mask all that much. I remember thinking it was good, but I also found it confusing and challenging because I didn't fully grasp how the time loop worked. And as a 10-year-old, that sort of thing frustrated me more than anything else. So it wasn't playing Majora's Mask as a kid that made me fall in love with it. It was thinking about it as an adult. I didn't realize this until recently.
Literally never thought of that idea. I'm glad I watched this video. I wouldn't have come to that conclusion on my own. Sick.
But my actual favorite thing about Majora's Mask was the conversation surrounding it. I loved talking about it, I loved watching videos about it, I loved sifting through the bend-drowned lore. I just loved engaging with anything Majora's Mask related because I found something so undeniably intriguing and appealing about its aesthetic and position in the Zelda canon. And from all of that, I created a version of the game in my head that was bigger and better than a title developed in a year over 2 decades ago ever could have been. After building it up for so long, playing it again made it painfully clear how different the actual game was from my idealized version of it. And to be clear, yes, I know I'm the problem, but I can't really control how my memory works. Time will always smooth away the finer details, making it easier to remember things as more than they were, especially when so much time is spent thinking about them with such reverence. BioShock Infinite opens with a quote from one of the Lutece twins saying, "The mind of the subject will desperately struggle to create memories where none exist." It is in reference to how the game handles certain aspects of the many worlds theory, but it also perfectly describes my relationship with Infinite, Assassin's Creed 2, and Majora's Mask. In the absence of playing these games, I unknowingly filled in details of my own about their stories and their gameplay. The longer I went without playing them, the better they were able to become. And that is why going back to them has been so hard. Not only am I a different person now who doesn't value all of the same things I once did and has had so many more experiences both with games and life in general, but also I've been remembering these titles as perfect versions of what they were. So it's no surprise that this potent combination led to me feeling disappointed when revisiting these games. And I imagine part of why I feel as negatively as I do about them is not because of their actual quality, but because of how let down I felt that they didn't live up to the impossible expectations I had set for them. To be honest, I'm afraid that this will keep happening with games I love, that I will lose more and more titles that once meant the world to me if I replay them. Thankfully, I do think some of them will be protected from this fate. I've talked before about how many of my favorite games...
That, and B, I think, even when you realize that the game wasn't as good as you remembered it, it doesn't undo the fact that... no, I guess it does, kind of. Huh. Very interesting, huh? Cool. Man, this is such a sick video. It makes you think about shit I haven't thought of before.
Ones that can't really be replayed. At least. Stuff like Outer Wilds and Shadow of the Colossus, and in my opinion at least, Breath of the Wild. Ones that center their core gameplay loops around discovery, making it so once those discoveries are made, they can't really be made.
True. Actually, 100% agreed. Yeah, for sure. And I think discovery, I can see myself generalizing that more and saying that seeing things for the first time in a game, or for the first time bottom text, is way cooler than seeing them again. And so playing that game for the first time, playing all those games you mentioned earlier in the video for the first time, of course you enjoyed it more because you were seeing this shit for the first time. Just like discovery in these games, you were discovering all this shit for the first time, so it was more enjoyable, and you're not supposed to rediscover it. That really, it's just a much more, like, if discovering a new path in a game or finding out like some tidbit of lore, or like finding a huge statue or something sick, right? that is in essence the exact same thing as discovering a whole new game mechanic or playing a game back in the day. Reliving it doesn't do it for you again. But at the same time, the moment of discovering it is fucking sick.
Again, titles like these are focused on a unique first playthrough and don't really care all that much about having any sort of replayability. There's certainly an argument that most games are best enjoyed on a first playthrough, and that's largely fair, but some clearly are more intentionally designed around that idea. Outer Wilds is the most pure example of this, as once you know the solution
to be fair, Outer Wilds, from what I heard, I never actually played it, but I watched I watched a little video essay on this game. From what I understand, it's cool to come back to try like optimizing and speedrunning, but that's not quite related.
The biggest mysteries in the solar system, you have everything you need to beat the game. And unless you find some technology to wipe your real life memories or get a really bad concussion, which I don't recommend, you can never play it again in the way it was intended to be played. While Shadow of the Colossus and Breath of the Wild are less extreme.
Yeah, so for a little bit of context, in case you haven't played that game, I haven't, but this info I've gained from the video I watched. The game actually allows you to do everything to beat it in the first. So this is it's the kind of game where you just reset after you die or whatever. And the game actually allows you to go and beat it on the first try, if I understand that correctly. Maybe there's like some limit, maybe for a try. I don't know, really don't know. I've never played it, but it provides you with all the tools you need to go and just straight up destroy the game. But it is info you lack, and you won't know how to do it unless you go through the steps of the game one by one, where it gives you like little cryptic tutorials, and you learn through parts of the game one at a time. And then with each new playthrough, you've learned one more piece of info, and you're able to go further because you know more about how the world functions. And so that's why knowing a lot about the game means replaying it just wouldn't make sense, because you could just go and straight up beat it. I feel the same for reading manga. I fucking loved Soul Leveling when it first came out. I loved the shit out of that thing. Rereading it for the first time was actually pretty fun, because the amount of content in Soul Leveling is wild. There is so much to read. So rereading it, I managed to forget a lot of details by the time I went on to my second read through. And so it was very enjoyable again. Third time, though, kind of doesn't cut it. Oh, no, for the third time I went and read the novel, that's right. And the novel had extra details and slightly different phrasing, and like it depicted stuff in a different way, so I could imagine things working differently. But then after that, really, that was it. There was nothing more to juice out of it. I reread it again a couple months ago, by the way, and it was like I was reading all of it, and I'm like, holy shit, this thing is quality. But I'm not. It's not the same shock factor of discovering and seeing all these fucking badass moments for the first time. But and you appreciate it in a different way afterwards.
Examples of this, they do share a lot of the same qualities that make for an amazing first playthrough, but offer a far less interesting experience every time you go back. And because I see these games as ones I can't truly
but games like that, they're just like watching media, movies, games, anime, manga, whatever the fuck. It's all the same shit.
That means anytime
it's an experience you live through once, and every time you go through it again, it's slightly different
to how they're designed. I do think this is something
you already know what there's to know.
Because my memory has already proven it is not infallible. And I don't want my positive opinions on these games to grow out of control any more than they already have. But a part of me is glad to know that I won't have the same experience with them that I did with Infinite, AC2, and Majora's Mask, simply because they share different design philosophies. After all this reflection, I find myself wondering, am I better off for knowing that I no longer like these games? To be honest, finding Infinite's story to be off-putting and nonsensical doesn't provide all that much value in my life aside from being able to make a video about it. It's obviously important to challenge the way you think about things so that
I think it's just interesting to learn.
Acting in accordance with how you truly think and feel, and not just following a train of thought based on some
Don't know about him, but to me, I just like finding out new things, even if they don't make things better. It's just cool. Discovery is fun.
But is liking a game, even though you probably wouldn't still like it if you actually replayed it, harmful? Does having this kind of
I don't think so either. I think either option is fine, and it doesn't really matter what you choose.
Just to check if it holds up. And I think the answer to these questions is no. That doesn't mean you shouldn't.
This guy is so smart, guys. He's
of. But you also don't owe it to anyone to replay something just so you can have a more up-to-date understanding of it. My thoughts on things now are not intrinsically more valuable than they were back then just because I'm older and more experienced with games. They're just my opinions, and I'm sure in another decade they will be different again and not necessarily better. I hope me replaying stuff and finding that I don't like it anymore doesn't keep happening, and I also hope I can work on ways to not let my memories drift so far from reality. But this may just be part of being a human. Another part of being a human, though, is holding on to stuff you care about. So love the games you love regardless of when you last played them. Don't be ashamed of looking at old titles with rose-colored glasses, and if it's still one of your favorite games, maybe don't replay BioShock Infinite. Regardless, though, of if you love it or hate it, if Infinite is rent-free in your mind like it does for me, and you'd like to hear some more thoughts on it, I actually made a whole nother video that's just as long as this one, solely focused on its ending. I dive into some of the various theories fans have put forward about it over the years, and tried to come to terms with what the ending was attempting to accomplish. And you can watch that video right now over on Nebula. Nebula is a creator-owned streaming service that is home to all of my videos. You can
Okay, so let me check Nebula real quick to make sure that I don't sell you guys something he doesn't do anymore. Okay, no, this guy still makes Nebula content. Okay, well, here you go. If you're feeling like you want more of his shit, go hit up his Nebula account, sub to him, do all that. Maybe give the video another watch. You know the drill. It's all the standard shit. That's it, because we're leeching off of his content is the nice thing to do. Yeah, okay. Now for the plugs, this one's very important. Don't fucking leave yet. Okay, here you go. First of all, sub to his channel. Second of all, more importantly, sub to my main channel where I make content that's way better than this, but also it takes me really long to make, so I don't make a lot of those videos, but go check them out anyways. You can subscribe to that channel. Don't worry about getting bombarded with notifications, because that's right, you only see one notification a fucking year. All right, bye.